Good afternoon. Welcome to the Profile and Enrollment Creation Training. We have an hour-long training plan for you. Just as a quick introduction, my name is Jennifer Barrera. I'm the HMIS Program Manager. Also joining me is Maria Vargas. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Maria Vargas. I'm the HMIS Assistant Admin here at the Coalition.
And I'm Tucker Morgan, and I'm the Data and Reporting Analyst at the Coalition.
All right. So first up, just as a reminder, I'm sure if you've been to our trainings recently, you've seen this slide a lot. If you could just remain muted unless you are asking a question, just to help cut down on background noise. If you do have a question, please go ahead and put it in the chat. We're monitoring the chat. Also, you could unmute and ask your question out loud. If you do, just introduce yourself before you ask. We don't necessarily know everyone's voices yet. Also, as a reminder, if you are signing into this training from your link, you can know that we'll have that attendance. If there's two people signing in an office and you would like for us to have that training record, you should go ahead and put your name and organization in the chat. So we can just keep track of the trainings that you've been to. All right, goals of this training, we're gonna briefly touch on client profiles, managing households, and then we're gonna talk about program enrollments, or our old lingo with entries. And then we are gonna talk about status updates, or what we used to call interims. We're going to talk about the move-in date and exits, and then we will have time at the end, hopefully, for some questions and answers. So Maria is going to go ahead and get started with a bit of a training refresher.
Yes, so you guys should all be familiar with this if you're not already on the live site, that you do have access to the training site. So you should already know kind of what this looks like. So this is your homepage. This is where you're going to be searching and or adding a client. So just like we did in Service Point, you want to make sure that you search your client either by their first name, last name, social security number, their date of birth, any of those information before you add them into the system. The main thing is we don't want to duplicate client profiles. So you want to make sure that you search them before you add them. So if you go to your next slide, after you have searched for your client and you've realized that they're not in there at all, and you go ahead and you click that add client, this is the page that's going to be popping up. So again, just like you did in Service Point, you want to make sure that you fill in all of the universal data elements for your client. One of the things that you will notice that's different is that the conditional formatting. So a good example is if you select data not collected for your quality of date of birth, the actual date field for the date of birth is going to disappear. So you won't even have the option to fill in a date if you have data not collected for that field, and also that the client that you're entering into the system is not going to be recognized as either an adult or a child. So that's just a helpful tip. If we go on the next page, this, again, you'll be filling out the rest of your profile information. One of the things that's also different is that when you hit yes for your veteran status, the following information pops up. So what it is it's basically asking you the start date when your veteran entered and when they left the service. So, and it's the rest of the questions, they're not all there, but it'll ask you specifically. It's either the drop downs are either yes, no, don't know, or data not collected, but it's for specifically what operations they were in. And I also believe it's whether or not their status of their discharge. Oh, and also the branch of military that they were registered to. So all that information is brand new to us because it wasn't on Service Point. So you just want to make sure that you add that information, because it will not, if you don't select an answer, it won't let you continue. You have to pick something from the drop down and to click save to continue on and entering in your information. So this is your profile and your release. So when you go ahead and you click save, if you see the green banner at the top, that means your changes or all the information that you entered has been successfully changed. If you get a red banner, that means that you have to go back and you have to correct your errors. The errors might actually be errors, or it might just be that you either skipped a question or it wasn't answered correctly. So you just have to go back and you have to make sure and double check that all the answers are accurately answered. That yellow banner that you see, that's for your release of information. So one of the two ways that you could make it go away. You can either hit the manage all the way to the left, to all the way to the right, or you could hit the privacy. Thank you, the privacy shield. That's right there. So once you are able to click those, you can go ahead and fill in your release of information. So does anybody have any questions on that? Feel free to unmute yourselves or ask it in the chat.
I do. So once in a while, I'll get an undocument and they don't have a social. So I'm going to get that red bar for missing information. Is there a way around it?
So you'll get a red bar if it's not answered. In the drop down, the pick list that you'll be able to see, when you hit that little caret, it'll be either data not collected, client doesn't know, client refused. So whatever it is that the client's saying, or whatever the client wants the answer to be, that's what the answer should be. The only time you're going to get an error is if you don't answer the question at all.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
You might have to put in all zeros for the social security number for an undocumented individual.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because on Service Point, it came up as errors when it was report time.
Yes, and that will still be true, even if it's that they don't have one. But yeah, you should put in, but you might have to put in all zeros. I think it's also was also the case that you could put in letters into Service Point, but in Clarity, you will not. It will say that you have to use. You can only enter numbers into there, so you should just use all zeros.
Okay, thank you.
So adding household members. So again, for those of you that are working with families or couples, you want to, again, make sure that you search the system to see if those clients are already in the system. So again, if they're not, you want to go ahead and you want to add each household member individually and enter in all of their universal data elements. And then once they're already in the system, that's when you can go ahead and you can hit this manage button to associate them with the client that you're working with. And I believe this next slide is yours, Jen.
Okay, so adding household members. So as Maria said, if you are adding new clients and intend for them to be members of the same household, you will add each client individually and update and enter rather the client profile information before you create the household. When you start to create a household, the first client that you're on, when you click manage and set the member type to head of house, that will default to head of household. So the first client where you create the household typically defaults. You can change that if you add people to a household out of order and the last person you wish to be the head of household, you can click on manage household, and then you can click next to the client's name. There's a little edit icon you hit, and then you can update the member type here. You can also add members to the household and remove them from the household using the start date here, or if someone's already a member, you can manage them and there's a field that pops up for exit date. As a reminder, something that's very different from Service Point if you're dealing with families is the household that you set up here in the profile is simply just a grouping of people who are in the household that you can choose from when you're creating an enrollment. But you still, the only actual household data that gets pulled onto the HUD report is the relationship to head of household field that is, that's a question within the enrollment. So we noted that a lot of the households that migrated over from Service Point into Clarity didn't migrate over well into that profile place. And people were a little worried. You don't need to worry about that. What is most important is the relationship to head of household that's in the program enrollment. But certainly cleaning up the household and managing it is will make future enrollments easier. All right, adding household members here. Clients cannot be in multiple households at once. This is new also from Service Point. So if you go to add a member to a household and they're already enrolled, you'll get this, this message here. Please pay close attention if you're removing someone from an existing household. If that household is enrolled in someone's another agency's program, you would need to use our messaging feature, that little envelope in the top right-hand corner of Clarity, to message whoever their case manager is before you remove someone from a household that's enrolled in their program. Also, be sure to assign a head of household with a type, the member type. The head of household, like I said, defaults to the profile you were in when you started the family. Any questions about managing households? Okay, we did do a whole training on it and recorded it, so there is a recorded training in our LMS, but this is just as a refresher before we get into enrollment. As another matter of refresher training, before we get into actual enrollments, there are 2 levels of tabs. The first here is that we're seeing here is the client level. That's where you can access the client profile history. This programs here is where you would click to kind of drill down into enrollments, which we're going to do in a moment. Here is notes. These are more public level notes, and public alerts can also be created and viewed here. Files, this is where some shared files could be uploaded, and also the forms for the Spanish release of information could be located there. Here's contact information and location. So this is what we're calling the client level tabs. And then if you were to click programs, actually, sorry, you can, if you're wanting to view an enrollment, you can click on the history tab here, and this is the view. It's very faint, but there is a color coding system. So in the overall history, as long as the client has consented to general sharing, you will be able to see the client profile and this history. If you're not from one of the agencies, if you click on program enrollment in the history and you're not from the agency that created it, you will only just see the program enrollment, the service, the referral, reservation, or assessment that it happened. You won't be able to click it open and view what's inside of it from this client level tab. The program tab, so right here from the client level, if you click on the program tab, you will be able to view, and this is kind of out of order a bit, so I apologize, but the program history, there's another history tab on the program level. It displays current and past programs. You can view information about enrollments at other agencies, but again, you can record your program services and assessments within your own programs at your agencies through this program history tab. So you would could, if you were from one of these 3 agencies, so I could click here because I am from the Coalition for the Homeless. This is an active project. If I wanted to add a service, I would click on the edit tab here, which would allow me to enter the program and add services or some other assessments, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Does anyone have questions about navigating the client level or program level tab?
We skipped a question for one of the previous slides that you did. So the question is, if a client is already enrolled by another agency and my agency provides an ID voucher for that client, must I enroll them again under my agency program in order to add the service?
Yes, you cannot add services to another agency's program enrollment. So you can only add service notes and services and notes and files to your own agency's program enrollment. I hope that answered your question, Paula.
So Jen, this is my first training for Clarity. How do
Okay.
I access the Clarity site?
Yep, I actually sent you through the help desk yesterday an FAQ. So you received an email and attached to it was a PDF document. If you open that, it tells you the link for the training site. You can't access the live site because you haven't completed the training. So
Okay,
if you complete all the required training, then we actually go into the live site and activate you as a user there.
okay,
But
it's not Service Point though, right?
nope. We literally, like, for lack of a better word, we packed up all of our information in Service Point and we moved it all over to Clarity.
Okay, so it'll be waiting for me, right?
Oh yeah, oh, it's waiting for you. And actually, the sooner you get that training done and get live in Clarity, the better.
Oh, I know.
Beds and stuff going on. Yeah, yep. But let us know if you run into any snafus with training. Send us a help desk ticket so we can get you rolling, because we've been live since October 14th in Clarity.
Okay.
Okay, nice. All right. So any other questions before we keep going? All right. So enrolling clients into a program, I think I'm doing a few slides and then I'm going to hand it over to Tucker. So the first thing is when you click on programs from the client level, and not to make you dizzy, but to go back here, when you click on programs, you will see right here the program history. So it will show all current and past programs that this client was enrolled in. Down here where it says programs available, this is what you will see under the programs available. All of the programs that are active from your own agency. So again, you can't enroll someone in a different program from a different agency, only your own agency's program. So in this instance, we chose to enroll this client in the hotel voucher program, and and it tells you a little bit about it. And then, so only active programs are visible. And you could click here to get a program description, and also it will tell you availability. So it will, in the instance of, we'll use Dottie as an example, if she has 25 beds and there's 20 people in them, if she clicks on her program, in that instance, it will show that there's 20 people enrolled and there's 5 availabilities. And so that's how she'll know that she can enroll 5 more people into her bed. So you would include any group members. If you have a program that allows for families or households, you could include them by toggling here, and then you would click enroll. Once you click enroll, you will enter the start date. And again, the start date should be, you should be entering these enrollments pretty likely on the exact same day, because the way that our system works is if someone calls the call center and says, I need a shelter bed, they need to know what beds are open that very minute. So if you're not entering data in same day or same time that you're enrolling people, we won't be able to have that capability. So you'll put in the project start date. The first person enrolled is the first enrollment that you see is for the head of household. So you would complete the relationship to the head of household. You would select the type of residence, their prior living situation, and the length of stay. After you click that, you will also be seeing the other two household members here. For the head of household, or the first person there that you enroll, you will complete the entire enrollment. So this is nothing new to any of you. This is a HUD entry assessment. We had it in Service Point. It just looks different because it's in a different, it's like we painted the walls of the house. It just looks different, but it's the same exact data. So you are entering the length of stay, approximate date homelessness started, number of times on the street, in emergency shelter, or in safe haven in the last 3 years, number of months homeless on the street. You will, you will add any disabling conditions, and you will complete these enrollment elements for each household member. At the bottom, remember to click save. You'll get that green bar that tells you that it was saved, and then it will, you'll do one household member, and then it will automatically show you the next household member's enrollment, and then the next until you've completed the enrollment data for each household member. Housing move-in date. Thank you, Tucker.
So if you have a housing program type, any type of housing program, as long as it's a permanent type of permanent housing, so either permanent supportive housing, a rapid rehousing, or any other type of permanent housing, the housing move-in date will show up right at the beginning, right above actually the homeless history, and this is what actually determines whether or not the clients are counted as housed in your project. And I know that folks used to have bed lists in Service Point, but it's actually the housing move-in date that determines it, and there are no bed lists. There are no bed lists in any housing programs in Clarity. The only bed lists are in night-by-night shelters. So I don't think anybody here is actually works at a night-by-night shelter. There's only entry-exit folks and rapid rehousing, and so everybody will. So nobody has to worry about bed lists in any of this. You just need to worry about that the entry is accurate, that the housing move-in date is accurate, and so the housing move-in date needs to be on or after the project start date. So if somebody is in a permanent housing project, it's very likely that they will enter the project on the day that they move in. And if it's rapid rehousing, it's likely that they'll enter the project sometime and spend some time in housing search with the rapid rehousing project before they move in. And in Clarity, the housing move-in date must be recorded on the project entry screen. So if you had clients in your project, in your program earlier, and then you're not sure whether or not they have a housing move-in date, you go back to the program enrollment and update the housing move-in date there. And it must be, as I said, on or after the project start date. And it also has to be before the project end date. So if you have a rapid rehousing project where you get a security deposit, but the client has not actually moved in when you dismiss them from the program, they won't be counted as housed by your project at all. They need to be enrolled at least through their move-in date in order to be counted as housed and to have a housing move-in date recorded. And they also can only have one housing move-in date per enrollment. So if a client moves during their time in the program, they keep their original housing move-in date unless they become homeless again, in which case they need to be dismissed from the program and re-enrolled with a new housing move-in, even if they kept their voucher for the whole time. So you can only have one on the project, one housing move-in date on the project enrollment. But everybody who is housed needs to have one. Very important. And now we can move on and see the other enrollment information. So when the way that Clarity works, it's very nice. It doesn't pull up extra questions unless you answer earlier questions that prompt them. So you have, if you ask, if you change a disability question to yes, then it will change it'll add a prompt to, is this condition long-lasting and significantly impair the client's ability to live independently? And if you answer that the client is a domestic violence victim or survivor, then it'll prompt you to answer with, are they currently fleeing and how long ago was the incident?
I had a quick question.
Sure.
So we had a client that was housed and kind of just basically walked out of the housing and is now homeless. They just left the apartment and now they are homeless. We need to remove that housing. Like, how would we go about putting that in?
Yep. So you would exit them from the program if they've abandoned their housing. Definitely. So they would no longer be in our program at all? So I don't know about your program. What program is it that you're working on?
It's rapid rehousing.
Okay, so in a rapid rehousing situation, you could dismiss and then re-enroll them if you continue to work with them. But they would have two enrollments actually, because if they were housed and then they walked out of that first place.
Okay.
Working with them.
Now they wouldn't need to be placed back in, and that wouldn't. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, we're trying to work with this person. This person is actually hospitalized right now. So so it's kind of been difficult for us to kind of like work with that person at this time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So with them being dismissed from our program, does that open up another bed for us, or?
It depends on your program, how the program is being managed. If the client has abandoned, given up their unit, but they still haven't used all of the rental assistance or all of the that's available in the program, or all of the case management, and you are still working with them, you could dismiss them and re-enroll them rather than terminating them entirely.
Okay.
But they would still wind up with two enrollments in that case. But it depends on whether or not your program is actually terminating the client or not.
Okay. They wouldn't have to be put back in the queue and then sent back to, like, re-referred to us from coordinated entry, right?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Also, just keep in mind, sorry. You also just want to keep in mind that there was a waiver issued. So depending on the funding source for your rapid rehousing, there's a waiver issued for the length of time when someone is hospitalized that they could be considered homeless still. So that increased during this waiver from 90 days, which it was before, to 180. But again, it is only for certain funding sources, and your agency had to have applied to receive that waiver. So you definitely should talk to whoever your program manager is from your agency to evaluate that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I will. I think we did apply for that waiver.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're safe there, but thank you so much, Jen.
All right. Okay. Tucker, do you want to keep going here on the enrollment?
I think we're still kind of coming up into more questions about the housing move-in date. So I think maybe we can continue answering questions about the housing move-in date and the process. So Christine and Paula both had questions about it. So Paula, in your case, so whichever agency has the program that is defined as the rapid rehousing program will enter the housing move-in date. So if Crossroads has the rapid rehousing program, then they'll be the ones who are entering the housing move-in date. Does that make sense? It depends on who has the program by type. And Christine, so if a client loses their housing and returns to homelessness and then is rehoused, then yes, those are the cases where you will be exiting and then re-enrolling the client. If a client if you manage to help your client move, so they never actually have a break, they move from one apartment to another, and they don't return to homelessness, then they keep their original housing move-in date. So it's really that, and it's really the key part is that the program enrollment from the time of the housing move-in date forward, the client is counted as housed for that entire time. So if they're not housed, that's why they would need to be dismissed. And it might be the case that, like, oh, well, maybe the client, does actually get, if it's a rental assistance, and maybe the client does get kicked out of their apartment, but they do line something up like just a couple weeks later, and there's somebody that they can stay with in the meantime. In those cases, you just keep the client enrolled, and they keep their original housing move-in date. It's really that if they return to homelessness, that they need to be dismissed and re-enrolled. All right. So moving on to the rest of the enrollment questions. So for the income, it's also very nice. You just switch the toggle for whichever income source or sources the client has, and then it prompts you to get the amount. It works much better than all of the way that the income. It works much better than all of the way that the income sources had to be started and ended in Service Point. And the key part is that anytime you're recording income and also for health insurance, will look very similar. That's what's true for the client at that point in time. We're not measuring, the start date or end date. It's really the HUD instructions and how Clarity shows it. Is that it's what is the client's income at this point? So what was the client's income when they entered the program? That's what's being asked right here on the enrollment. If we go on to yep, and so once you complete each household member, if you have other group members in the household, it will just pull up the next member of the household. And for children, it's if the household member is under 18, there will only really be the disability and health insurance questions that you need to answer. It's much shorter. And once you complete the enrollment, then you're going to be kind of moved right inside the program. And inside the program, you'll see that you can see that enrollment tab, and that's where you would go back and edit the enrollment. For instance, updating a housing move-in date. You can also see their history in the program and provide services. So this provide services is where you will be able to record services within the program. All services require a program enrollment. So a client has to be enrolled in a program in order to receive services. The services that make sense to record inside each client in each client file are things like case management, where you can write notes, or referrals made, and that's where you do that. And then next to that is assessments, which we will cover next, because that's where you put in annual and status assessments. Then once you're within the program, and you look over to the right, you'll see the next slide, which is who the assigned staff is. So by default, whichever staff creates the program enrollment will be assigned. So Dottie, you will be assigned everyone at the shelter, because you will be the one entering all of the program enrollment. So that's the way that will work. It might be the case for like rapid rehousing programs or other programs that somebody other than the case manager is doing the actual enrollment. And in that case, you can change who the assigned staff is for that program just by clicking the edit button next to assigned staff and changing who it's assigned to. And you can only assign staff within your own agency. So that's who you have access to. There's also a toggle for make program private. You want to be very careful about toggling that on, because if you toggle that on, it means that nobody in the rest of the system will be able to see that you're working with that client, or that the client will be receiving services from your program. And if you want to do, for instance, anything with coordinated entry won't be able to see the things that you're doing with the client when you're trying to coordinate with them. So make sure that you leave that off, unless it's, for instance, like a substance abuse related program that you think needs to, the whole program and everything in it needs to be kept private. All right, questions? Christine, I'm not sure what you mean by you've been entering those who are my clients. Should I be doing it this way?
Under the assigned person, I've been seeing AA, which is the administrator, and I've been going in and actually changing those that are my clients. Should I be doing it that way, or?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So all of the clients who are migrating over were assigned just to admin, because it was the migration team that created all of those enrollments. So if you should definitely go in and change them to yourself if they're your clients. That's exactly right what you were doing.
Thank you.
So can I just add something to that? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. But if you don't see someone listed as a case manager, it's because they've yet to become active in the system. So once they become active, you'll be able to see their initials and their name there, and you'll be able to assign them to as case managers. Sorry.
Yep, Good point, Maria. Thank you. Oh, you're muted, Jen.
Sorry. So I'm looking at the time. We have about 15 minutes left, and we have about 15 slides left. So we're going to move pretty quickly, but please unmute and ask questions or put in the chat any questions you have. The next part of program enrollment is assessments. And so we had called them interims in Service Point, but here in Clarity Land, they're status assessments. So when you are in the program level of tabs, after you've enrolled them, you can view their history or provide services. The next tab over here is assessments. If you click on that, the assessments that are available for anyone enrolled in your program are listed here. So if you were to click on assessments and these are not located, it likely means that the type of project or program that you're enrolling the clients in doesn't require a status update or annual update. So that's mostly some of the service only. But here, status update, you can complete that whenever, but this is also where you would complete a current living situation. And then here, an annual assessment must be completed 30 days before or after the project enrollment anniversary date. So the 1-year anniversary of someone being enrolled in a project, you have to complete that annual assessment 30 days before or after.
One quick thing, Jen, you made it sound a little bit like the current living situation was still in the status update. That's not true. It would be another, if it was an outreach or coordinated entry project only, then it would show up as another separate assessment here. But if you don't have if you don't have an outreach or a coordinate, if you're not in an outreach or coordinated entry project, you won't see a current living situation.
Thank you, Tucker. Okay, update and annual assessment. So if you were to add an annual assessment, you would click here, the start button next to the annual assessment. You would, the project start date or status date would be the date that you're completing the assessment. Again, it needs to be within 30 days before or after your project start date, the anniversary date. You would complete all of the any disabling conditions and barriers here. Let's see. As a reminder, if you had an enrollment and someone had any of these disabling conditions toggled at the toggled no, and you're completing a status assessment and you're adding a disability, it will not pull onto a report. So this is really important, particularly if you have a permanent supportive housing project that's requiring a disability. You need to, if someone has an additional disability or a change to any of these disability fields while they're enrolled in your program, you need to, only for disability, you need to go back to the enrollment and add that in the enrollment field. So that's really important to remember. So if you run a report and you send a ticket to the help desk and say, I added this disability, and at the last status assessment or annual assessment, it says yes, and then I pulled the APR and it doesn't indicate that they have one, that's the reason, because it's only pulling the disability from the enrollment data. Okay, other assessments. Other assessments may be listed here as long as the SPDAT, assessments could be as long as the SPDAT or as short as the current living situation. Again, it depends on your project type. The SPDAT would only be available if you're in the coordinated entry agency. And again, the current living situation would only be available if you're in an outreach or shelter project. Is it in for the shelter project?
No, it's implied.
It's only the, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Clarity, a current living situation is when you create a shelter entry, it kind of creates one automatically for you, so you don't need to fill one out.
That's why as soon as I said that, I was like, wait, it's inferred. All right. All assessments are dated and will not contain the HUD questions. So also to remember the assessments that the VI assessments, the non-HUD assessments that we completed are still being mapped over and will migrate into our Clarity site over the next few weeks. So you will complete all of the questions in the assessment, and then that wasn't a lot of slides for assessment. So we'll stop here really quick, even though it's not a slide, to see if anyone has any questions. Okay. All right. Maria, do you want to walk through the exit slide?
I can do that. So this is your exit screen. When you want to exit a client out of your program, you want to make sure that you're in your program level. You go to your history tab, and the actual exit button is at the top right of that screen. So what you want to do if you're working in a entry exit shelter, you want to exit the clients as soon as they leave the program. So one of the things also to remember is that clients so in Service Point, you had two different things to keep track of. You had bed lists and you had entry exits. Sometimes they didn't match. So there could have been clients that were exited out of the bed list, but were not exited out of your program. So all of that information, when it migrated over to Clarity, it could have either messed up your numbers and it could have not been accurate to what you guys had on paper. So you want to go ahead and you want to backdate their exits to when they actually left if they migrated over into Clarity when they should have been already closed. So just try to remember that. Also, night by night shelters, they should be using the potential exits report, which is on the report training that we had. And that's also available on the LMS. To see what clients should be exited because they haven't been in the program for the past 30 days. So they should be closed. Does anybody have questions on that? No. Okay. Actually, could you go back one? Because it was also, so when you exit someone from your program and they're attached to a household, you also want to make sure that you toggle the appropriate clients also to be exited from that program. Sorry, thank you. So if we go to the next page, so this is your exit screen. Again, you want to make sure that you exit them for the appropriate date. You click the appropriate destinations. The destinations are the same. It's nothing new. And also you want to make sure that you update whether it's your increased income. Yep, so your increased income for when they leave, to make sure that it updates when it comes in through reports. Because the income, if you didn't do it on an annual or in a status assessment, it won't get pulled through a report. So you just want to make sure that you update that. Everything else, the disabilities, income, health insurance, and the benefits do get pulled over from the last information that was recorded. Now, if you exited a client and it was either by mistake or you did it for the wrong date, just go back and go ahead and delete that exit. Or you could just fix that exit. But once you delete them, it does make them active again within your program. So there is no need to reopen them. You just want to go back and go ahead and delete that exit. Is someone asking a question? I don't think so. Nope. Okay. All right, I think that's the end of it. If someone has questions, you can go ahead and unmute yourselves.
Mhm. Just last call. If anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute and ask them. And just as a reminder, if you have any questions or problems and you, the first thing you should do is go to your agency manager. If they are unable to help you, there are a lot of help articles that are located right in Clarity. You can access them from the training site or the live site, or you can also send an email to hmis@rihomeless.org. It's a ticket, a help desk that Tucker, Maria, and myself answer any of your questions that come in through the email. And we are available. That time has actually changed. It's 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. on the help desk.
Jen, this is Paula Hudson from Better Lives. I have a question.
Yeah, hi, Paula.
So when a client becomes housed and they're exited from the homeless bin, for lack of a better word, I don't know why we're calling it now, but we are still providing supportive services, like we're checking in with them once a month to make sure everything is okay. Do we then have to re-enroll them under supportive services only?
Yes,
Okay,
that's recommended. Yes.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Good question, Paula. All right, any other questions? Please go ahead and unmute yourself, ask your questions. Otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and wrap up. All right. Thank you all. We're going to put this recording onto our LMS system for folks. And we'll send out the slides from today's training. And I hope you have a great day. Take care, everybody.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.